it.
We are
So,
recording.
students, we have with us tonight Jeff Price. He teaches at Science Hill, and he has been a scorer for a number of years. And we've got some other people visiting with us tonight. I think I saw Dr. Keith. You want to say hello, Dr. Keith?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for doing this. This is going to be very helpful for students.
Yes,
You're
and
welcome.
Dr. Honeycutt's here. Hello, Dr. Honeycutt.
Hey, I'm start my video. Hey, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a nice day.
Well, I think that the fact that the day is winding down helps it tremendously, don't you? Anyway, we really are tickled to death to have uh, Coach Price with us today. He's been scoring for a while. I'll let him tell you about that, and I'll just let you go ahead and start. And while he's talking, if you would go ahead and jot down questions that you want to ask him, or remind my students, unless you've made arrangements with me ahead of time, you need to turn on your camera. Thank you. Take it away,
Okay.
Coach Price.
All right. Well, I'm Jeff Price. Like I say, I've been at Science Hill. This is my 30th year of teaching, actually. I've been at Science Hill for 22 of those years. And I started working on edTPA in 2010. Dr. Thompson brought me in on that way back in the day before it even started, when we were doing the candidates, the student teachers at ETSU were doing hard copy portfolios and 3-ring binders with DVDs, and we were going over and getting them and bringing them and scoring them by hand and bringing them back. And then about 2000, we did that for a couple of years, and then Pearson took it over and it went electronic. And I was a scorer until 2013. And then in 2013, I got promoted to, I'm a scoring supervisor now. So what I do now is I have a team of scorers, and I just basically go in and I back read their work and check their work and make sure that they're scoring properly. And if we have 2 scores that aren't in agreement, then I resolve those scores and we work on just kind of whatever comes up. But I've been doing that since I started that in 2013. So, and I'm in secondary ELA. So I know that some of you guys are not in secondary ELA, but I'm going to try to talk as generically as I can about some things that are kind of common threads in the TPAs. And I may stop here and type every once in a while. So Ms. Rock, Dr. Honeycutt, if I misspell something or something, you guys feel free to come in and correct me, and I'll just keep chugging on. So anyway, there's kind of some things that they're just sort of some overall things that I want you to think about when you come into to scoring. Okay. And like one of the things, and I want you to kind of take this mindset into when you go in, especially if you stay in Tennessee and teach, because we evaluate on a 5-point scale, just like we evaluate the edTPA on a 5-point scale. And what you want to remember is that 3 is a rock solid score. Okay. 3 is not an average score. 3 is a rock solid score. So if you get 15 threes, you won't get 15 threes. You shouldn't get 15 threes, because we encourage the scorers to use the whole rubric, and they're I try to stay. I try to stay.
Yeah, let me hear you.
Okay. But if you get this back and you got 3,
Maybe we should go help Jeff, not Jeff.
Hello?
Is that Lori?
Hello? What's going on? Somebody. Can you hear me okay?
Do you think you're gonna peg him?
I think someone mic's on by accident.
Yeah, somebody, yeah. And I can't tell because I can only see 3 people. So, but but 3 is rock solid. 5 is a veteran teacher on a very good day. That's the way that was described to me when I was way back at the beginning. So that's the one thing that I remembered. That's the one thing that I remembered about 5s. We give very few 5s. So, you know, it's really, if you get a 5, be happy about it, but we don't give a lot of 5s. So your baseline is 3, and then there are lots of rubrics that are easy 4 rubrics. And so I'm going to talk to you about how to go with how to get your easy 4s there. Okay. Now, what scores are going to look for when we start looking at this is what we call a preponderance of evidence, which means that you know, like on your rubric 5 talks about multiple assessments, multiple forms of assessment. And I can't give you an answer to what multiple forms of assessment is. There's not a magic number. Okay. But we're going to look for a preponderance of evidence. I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit later. Your easy 4 rubrics, I'm actually going to talk about it right now. Your easy 4s, where you should really be able to pull off an easy 4, is rubrics 5, 10, 12, and 15. Okay. In rubric 5 is pretty simple. All you have to do is have multiple forms of assessment. Okay. Well, see, I already got a typo. And they should be of varying types.
We have done really well as a college to have 5s in 12, but we are having a lot of difficulty getting what I think is an acceptable number of 5s in rubric 5, 10, or 15.
Yeah.
I saw some improvement on 15 last year, but 5 and 10, you're right. Those would be easy 4s, I think.
Yeah. And so you want to have varying types, preferably. I like to see in ELA, I want to see a summative written product. Okay. So I'm going to talk about, because when I get to rubric 1, I'll probably repeat myself here, but you're going to have a lot of, you know, one day the students are going to write a thesis and an outline for an essay, and we're going to assess that. So that's one form of assessment. The next day they'll write a supporting paragraph for an essay, and that's going to be the next assessment. The third day there's going to be that summative, and we're going to give them a timed essay to write. And that's your beginning sequence. And you're going to want to have some more informal assessments tied to that. Okay. So, and you want to be explicit about those and kind of list out, these are my informals, these are my formals, and here's going to be my summative. But preferably, I like the summatives to be, I like the summative to be in that learning set. A lot of candidates will go, well, we're working toward a final assessment 2 weeks later, but I kind of like that summative to be at the end of that learning segment that I'm actually seeing in commentary. 10 is, of course, you got to have 3 things to get that 4 and 10 changes. And you have to ask yourself the question, is my change going to be something that is actually going to improve learning? Okay. And you've got to be specific about that. You can't say something like, I would ask more higher level questions. You're not going to, if you're going to talk about asking higher level questions, you've got to be explicit about the higher level questions that you're asking. So you got to be explicit there. You can't just talk in vagaries. Second thing is, the changes have to improve learning. Okay. When you start talking about individuals, you're going to be working with your focus student. You want to work with your focus students. Okay. And that's going to be something like not I'm going to meet with them, but something more like I'm going to meet with them and I'm going to provide for them a graphic organizer or something of that sort. I'm going to give it, it's going to be an explicit support that's focused on helping that student improve their learning. And then of course you need to have your research theory connections. So that's how to get your 4. That's how to get your easy 4 in 10. 12 is like, 12 should be a slam dunk, no brainer 4. And that's really actually one where you should be able to get a 5. Okay. Because you're going to, for the 4, you're going to focus on strengths and weaknesses in your feedback. And then to get to that 5, whoops. And then to get to that 5 there, you want to provide a strategic support.
Could you explain to them what you mean by strategic support?
Yes, it's like, okay, so it's like, it's going to be something like if I have, let's say I've got, say, I had a kid a few years ago who was a Liberian kid and his English was really not very good. So in his feedback, would talk to him about the format of the paragraph. And what I basically would do was give him a template with the sentence frames. And it was basically just like you go in and here's your sentence frame, here's your sentence starters, and fill in the blank. Okay, so it's going to be something, it's going to be a specific sort of support. If they're having trouble, if they're in English and they're having trouble writing a thesis, then I'm going to give them a template for a thesis and have them fill that in. Okay, and so I'm going to look at each individual case for what, it's again, you got to say, this is the actual support that I'm going to use. Maybe a graphic organizer, it may be sentence starters, it may be you have a video. One of the things that I do is like if I've got kids that are writing lots of comma splices and stuff like that, then in their feedback I'll give them a video. You could give them I wouldn't give them a worksheet on comma splices, but I would give them a paragraph with comma splices in them and have them identify and correct the comma splices. It'd be something like that. So it's got to be something that's like, you're going to zero in on, this is what this person needs. And I would work from there. Okay.
Thank you.
15 to me is identical to 10. Okay. Next steps have to be logical. Okay. Try to avoid reteaching. I mean, it's literally what it is. Next step, move on to the next thing. And then I'm going to have explicit supports for at least 2 focus students or groups. And I'm going to have my research theory connections. This is going to be kind of wonky, but it's there. All right.
So the difference in my mind between 10 and 15, and tell me if I'm wrong, please. Okay. The difference in my mind between 10 and 15 is that 10 is a reflection on the instruction.
Yes.
And 15 is next steps based on the assessment.
Right.
That's the basic difference.
Based on what my kids learned and what my kids didn't learn. So like one of the things that I might look at is one of the things I do whenever we do an essay, I just keep a laundry list and we have a running laundry list of on a Google Doc of this is what I saw. Quit using second person references. You know, the difference between that and who, things like that. And I kind of keep that feedback. So, and then my next step there might be, I need to stop and teach a lesson on, well, like maybe poetry analysis or something, how we do the analysis part of our essays and stuff like that. But yes, it's based on what I saw on this set, because I talk about essays because that's the main thing I'm assessing. So the come on, Jeff, come on. So I just, that thought was in my head and I just totally lost it. But it's based on what I've seen in the essays. So,
Okay, thank
okay.
you.
Now, this is one of the things that I want to really stress here, is because it seems like I'm going to be talking out of both sides of my mouth. More is not necessarily better, but use all your pages. Okay. Use all your pages. The only thing that I will say about that is that use them answering the prompts. Okay. Don't, when you get into that instruction commentary, or when you're talking about your knowledge of students or something like that, don't go into your philosophy of education. Don't go, I really believe this, or I really answer the question. Okay. But use all your pages to answer the questions. Okay. And sentence frames are incredibly helpful. So look at your rubrics, look at the language in whatever your rubric is, and use those sentence frames so that your score is looking at that and going, okay, they're hitting this part of the rubric. By that same token, we call it a drive-by, especially in research, like a candidate will drop a name. I'm Vygotsky'd out, but they'll, but you've got to tell, when you're dealing with research, I'm going to put this and use the language. Use the language of the rubric to preface your statements. Okay. Explicitly connect research to learning tasks. Right. So you're going to say, so when you're getting into rubrics 3 and 4, when you're getting into rubrics 3 and 4, you're saying, this is what I did because the research says such and such, and make sure that you're making those connections to that. I'm kind of just bouncing around here, but in rubric 3, when you hit that, when you answer your knowledge of students, don't go, the school I'm at has 2,500 students and they like to play sports and they like to play music and they like social media and they like to watch horror movies. That's not what you have to say is, because they like sports, because they like sports, we watch, because I'm in Minnesota and because we're big hockey fans, we watched Miracle on Ice as a complex text. Or, I'm from somewhere in Indiana, or I'm from, I say, a famous musical artist is from this town, or and so, or the students like this kind of music, and because they like this kind of music, I brought this song in here, or I brought this poem in here. And so it's not just what you know about them or have gotten to know about them based on your experience with them. You've got to connect. You got to say, because I knew this is why I chose this task, because it's got to be suited, because it's supposed to be suited to what you're teaching the kids. Okay. And then, when you move on through the prompt, you're going to want to connect those tasks to the research. All right. Ms. Rocket asked me about a couple of about rubric 1. Okay. As long as now, and I don't know what, if you're in math or something else, I don't know what exactly your rubric's going to say, but what you have to do in rubric 1 to get a 4, you've got to build from one skill to another. In an ELA, it's going to be to a final summative written product. Okay. So we're seeing like my learning sequence segment would be something like, on the first day we read a poem and we wrote a thesis. On the second day, we wrote a thesis outline. On the second day, we wrote a supporting paragraph. And then on that third day, I'm going to give them a completely different prompt and have them write an essay. Okay. And so, but I'm going to give them feedback all the way through there. Okay. It's got to be a logical sequence that I'm moving from this thing. And that's my logical sequence. I'm moving from a thesis to a supporting paragraph to a complete essay. Okay. And each lesson builds on the previous one. And then your connections between those lessons have to be explicitly stated. So, so what I like to see when I get to that part of it is to say, in lesson 1, I did this. In lesson 2, I did this. This builds on lesson 1 by dun, 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 dun. And then in lesson 3, I did this. And this builds on lessons 1 and 2 by, one of the things that you can do that will help, like maybe think about moving up the taxonomy or something like that. There it is. Okay. I love Google Docs. And then, or something like, I do, we do, you do. Okay. So we're going to move. So again, we're going to move kind of through that sequence of things. I'll go through all this and then I'll answer all your questions after that. But I'm trying to hit some high points. And then again, if you're doing this, you should be able to hit a 4 on rubric 1 pretty easily. Okay. I give a lot of 4s on rubric 1. When I'm actually scoring, I give a lot of 4s on rubric 1. So,
we get a lot of 3s and 4s on rubric 1. We have very few 5s.
3s, and all you have to do to get a 3. All you got to do to get a 3 there is teach beyond literal comprehension. And there it is. All right. That's all you got to do to get a 3 right there. And we get very few. I mean, I see very few 2s. I see lots of 3s. Okay. And then she'd ask about rubric 6, rubric 7, and rubric 8. And I'm going to be honest with you, in maybe not rubric 8, because you can, Matthew and I have been working a lot on questioning for, I guess you're in there somewhere, Matthew. We've worked on, Matthew's my intern. So we've been working a lot on moving from level 3 questioning to level 4 questioning. But let's talk about rubric 6. If you have any kind of rapport at all with kids, and if they're not, if they're not throwing stuff at you, and and they're listening to you, and you're not having to stop and correct, you're going to get a 3. All right. So the key to 4, now theoretically, and I know we're in this Zoom breakout rooms and social distancing, so it's hard to do cooperative learning. Ideally, you're going to have one of your clips is going to be a whole group instruction, and one of your clips is going to be small group instruction. Okay. Now in this environment, that's really difficult. Okay. But if you can do it, then do it. Rubric 6, like I say, any kind of rapport, and if the students are being respectful to them and you're showing respect to them, you're going to get a 3. All right. I mean, really, I don't want to sound like crass or anything, but if you show any kind of ability to relate to and communicate, all right, anything, and you're going to get a 3. Rubric 7, if you teach beyond literal comprehension,
So I'm assuming that's like higher order. For other
Yes.
subject areas, it would be just the higher order.
yeah.
Okay.
And I have no clue how that works in
Yeah.
anything but what I'm doing. But yes, if you're teaching, yes, think higher order. All right. Now rubric 8 is now you can get a 4 on rubric 8, but that's really kind of I think that's a developed skill. I think you get the more you talk. I mean, if you're not hitting 4 right now at this point in your process, I wouldn't beat myself up over it, because it's really easy to answer 3. It's really easy to ask level 3 questions, but you gotta, because it's not something you can orchestrate. If you're going to that level 4, you're building upon a response. So, I can do that pretty easy now because I've been teaching 30 years. And I teach really smart kids. Okay. So we can have those kinds of conversations where they will give me something that will make me build upon what they are saying. Okay. But anyway, a what question is going to be what we call that's a literal comprehension. What's 2 plus 2? It's 4, right? What's, if somebody sees a simile in a poem and you go, what is that? And they go, it's a simile. Okay. That's a level 2 question. All right. And that's going to be a level 2 question. All right. Now, what is the function? That's going to be more like a level 3. Okay. how question. It's going to be level 3. A why question is going to be level 4, level 3 too. Now, where you're going to hit level 4 is, I know that's not all spaced, and I know I'm like, try to be OCD about that, but I'm not. Okay, so I think this is the best way to do that. That's going to be a level 4. Okay, but what else? All right, why do they do that? Well, they do this, okay. Find me another question. Okay. The way I used to practice this when I was a young English teacher is like, I would take the kids, like if I was teaching mythology, I would take them to the library and I would give them some kind of subject and I would give them a question. I'd give them one question to start with. They would come back, find that question. They would bring me the answer. And then I would ask them another question. And then they would go, and then so you're learning to take what they're saying and building. Now, another good way that we do this in English class is like, I've found out that my kids really, we do a lot of things on Google Doc. We just do a Google Doc. I'll put a prompt up since kids don't want to talk on Zoom and they don't want to talk with masks on their faces. Then we just type on the Google Doc and and when they type those answers there, it makes it really easy for me to ask them another question. You know, if I have them answer something the night before and I'll go in that night and look at it and I'll ask them another question, I'll come in and go, I've asked you all another question, so answer that question. Okay. And that's something that you can do just like this. If you're recording your learning segment and you're working off the document like that, you can ask those questions. And you can also, guys, you can also put transcripts. You can go beyond that 6 pages on the instruction commentary with transcripts. Just make sure they're answering the prompts. Okay. Don't give me 4 pages of transcripts and then I spend the time reading through the 4 pages of transcripts and it's people have talked and you haven't asked a question. You want to use that like to prove your questioning. You want to use that to talk about your textual references. Okay. So let's talk about rubric 9 while we're here. Let's talk about rubric 9. And I don't know how this looks in other disciplines, okay? But in my discipline, the candidate, not the students, okay? It's not the students using textual references. It's the candidate using textual references. Okay, again, English is all I know, so I'm talking within English. But like when I teach all the pretty horses. And I always have a section every day in my all the pretty horses unit that says, this is why Cormac McCarthy is the greatest writer of our time. Okay, and so what I'll do is I'll pull a passage. You know, I'll pull a passage out of the book, out of the novel where he's next level. You know, like one of my favorite one is, if you guys are familiar with the book, John Grady Cole has a fight with an assassin when he's in prison. And it's like some of the most amazing writing that I've ever read. And so I'm going to take that piece of text and I'm going to strategically use it to do whatever it is that I want to do. Okay. So it's me choosing textual. Now you can't just choose a whole, you know, if you're in English, I'm going to choose a whole point. You can't do that, but you might pull out 3 or 4 little chunks of the poem and say, I want you to look at this. Okay. In a Shakespeare play, I'm going to pick out a segment of lines. And so it's strategically selected textual references. right now, guys, and I'm going to tell in the environment that we're in right now, I'd say get your 3 and 6 and 7. You know, get your 3 and 6 and 7, because it's really like the level 4 rubric talks about respectful interactions between students, and you just don't get, it's just not happening. I mean, it may be happening for somebody else, but it's not happening for me in this context right now. So 6 and 7, you know, you're going to get that level 4 when you have like just a really great discussion of something. And it's just not happening right now. Which is going to have, I'm talking a lot. I talk a lot more than I used to teaching class now, which is fine, because they're going to get to, because you guys know, you're going to get to college, you know, the lecture been a 4-letter word, and then you get to college and a professor walks into your 10:30 class and talks for an hour and a half. And you're sitting there going, when am I going to draw a poster? When are you going to put me in a group? When am I going to draw a poster? And I know lecture's been vilified, but you know, I'm like, okay, if you guys aren't going to talk to me, I'm going to talk to you. So, because I can talk about my stuff.
Discussion is extremely difficult on Zoom.
Yes, it is.
It's very difficult. Now,
And
we've told the students, of course, they should always be trying for at least a 3, but as long as they have a 3 on everything in prompt 1 and everything in task 1, have a 3 and everything in task 3, that's right there, 30 points. They need 10 more to get out of task 2.
yeah.
And you've shown them, you know, where they can get more than 3 points. So I do hope they don't lose a whole lot of sleep over their task 2 scores if they aren't where they
I
need
really
to be.
don't, guys. Don't beat yourself up over it, but just get yourself in your questioning. Get yourself in your questioning up about, I mean, look at what I've given you right there, you know, and think about asking those kinds of questions. And at the beginning right now, you guys are new right now, write down yourself a list of questions, you know, write down a list of questions and start asking those questions. If the kids jump in and take over, then that's what you want them to do. But at least you're not going in there going, okay, what are they going to say? And then you have that terrible silence and nobody's talking to each other. But I will tell you too, if you want to get better discussions, use the Google Docs, because we just sort of ran on it by accident. I put up a free write prompt in Google Docs last year. It was the first time I'd ever done it. And the kids all answered the prompt on the Google Doc. And I'm like, oh, wow. You know, but then you get to see what everybody says. You get to see that everybody's responding. And again, we understand that you're eliciting responses. Okay. Yeah. Ideally, you're speaking and asking questions and the kids are answering, but we understand that when you put up a free write and the kids are answering it, you're eliciting responses. Okay. And that's where rubric 8 is.
So if they were screen recording, then capturing that, as well as, Jamboard and Padlet, like Shay's saying, are also good. But they
Right.
need to be screen recording for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Because, and that's another thing about task 2. Don't talk about anything in the instruction commentary that isn't in the clips. Okay. Timestamp. Let me write that down. Don't say, well, it's not in the clip, but 5 minutes before this primary source of evidence is the clips. Okay. So I'm just going to go, okay, you just wasted this. You know, you got to look at this like you've got an economy of pages and you've got an economy of sentences, and all of those sentences have to help you. All right. And that's not going to help you. Okay. Don't reference things. Because I'm going to read like I always read it, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Those rubrics for those commentaries for 6, 7, 8, and 9. But I'm going to make my decision on the clips. Okay. But I like timestamps. Like if you're building on a response, say I built on a response at something, something. So, because what I do, I don't know if everybody does this, but what I do, I read the instruction commentary before I watch the clips. And so I'm going to say, okay, I know at this point to look for that. Because after 10 minutes, sometimes, and make your clips 10 minutes, but do stuff in your 10 minutes. Okay. And don't read stuff to the students. I would totally avoid direct instruction, because what the clips are supposed to do is show your action with the students and the students' interactions with each other. Okay. So don't read 10 don't spend, sometimes, and they'll start reading. Candace will start reading, and I just kind of sit there and do other stuff until I hear them quit reading. And then I look and they've used 6 minutes of a 10-minute clip and they haven't helped themselves at all. Okay. So think about this. I've got 20 minutes to help myself. How am I going to help myself here? And you need to look at things in your clips. And if it's not helping you, you need to situate your clips so that the stuff is helping you. All right. The more you spell things out, and the more that you don't make your score guesstimate, the better your portfolio is going to be. Okay. Because they're long. And it takes us 2.5 hours to go through a portfolio. And if I'm sitting there going, would you please say something? You've written 10 pages and you haven't answered anything. Please say something. So make sure that you're spelling everything out.
I tell them to avoid nuance.
Yes, definitely. This is not, okay, yeah, and this is not, you're not writing a great American novel, okay? Don't, no florid prose, none of that. Just answer the questions. Just answer the questions. That's all we want to happen. All right, let me hit, and we talked about 10, so 11. I'm going to talk to you like about some things like the difference between a 3 and a 4. For a 4, I want to see specific. I'm going to capitalize that. I want to see specific evidence from more examples. Okay.
Before you go much further,
Okay.
this actually goes back to rubric 2 and 3.
Okay.
After reading some responses for 2 and 3, I'd like for you to talk about deficit view. Have you
Oh yeah.
given students?
Our teachers that, if it's something like these students would rather look at their phones than listen to this, or, anything that you say about a kid that's just negative. They're lazy. We really try to get them to do this, but they're so lazy that we can't get them to do anything. It's that kind of stuff. Just don't be negative about them at all.
And how about their families, home lives, that kind of thing?
I wouldn't bring up anything like that either. I mean, you can bring up and say something like, half of my kids are from single parent homes, and so I chose this story about this girl or this boy who's being raised by his mother alone or by his father alone and something like that's not a deficit view.
Yeah, that's creating relevance. Okay.
Right. Deficit
That's what I
view,
thought.
deficit view is going to be denigrating a kid. If you're denigrating a kid, then that's deficit view, and that's going to get you in trouble. I really didn't talk about 2 and 3, did I? I talked about 3 some.
You did some, but I like what you're doing. I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure that I got that in there.
All right. And I'll answer. And I'm sorry, I haven't looked at the chat. So I'll go back and open that up when I get done. I'm terrible with chat. So just
That's okay. I think that they're mainly talking about books they want to read.
okay.
They're English nerds in here, but
Read the
I'm
Border
sure.
Trilogy by Cormac McCarthy. Cormac McCarthy's the greatest writer of our time. Dr. Honeycutt will give me a second on that one. So, okay, rubric 13. Read all of Cormac McCarthy's books. Read them all. Okay, rubric 13. Okay, don't be vague. This one's kind of a weird one because really, if you, like we talked about, strategic, Jeff, yes, strategic supports for all 3 focus students, you should get a 4. And that's one of the ones that's it's a weird one because we give a lot of 2s here because people are just vague. You know, they say, well, I'll have a meeting with student. I'm going to have a meeting with student A, and we're going to talk about her paper. You know, what you want to do is say something like, I had a meeting with student A. She was not prefacing the analysis in her essay with sentence frames. And so I made her revise her paragraph with sentence frames before she began her explanation. And then that's going to move you from a 2 to a 4. So really, we give a lot of 2s on 13 because people are just vague. I gave their papers back to them and asked them if they understood, and they said yes. And that's vague. That's a limited, no opportunities for feedback. Okay, and I haven't talked about the tricky ones. Rubrics 4 and 14 are associated. All right. So again, okay, and you guys can jump in here or you guys can, I'm speaking out of my English filter. Okay, you got to have language function. Language function. Okay, and so let's say analyze. I think y'all, okay, and then let's say we're going to have vocabulary. The words we need to know. I'm going to go here because this was where it gets fuzzy. And you have to do language to get a 3. You have to mention language, vocabulary, and either syntax or diction. Or not diction, syntax or discourse. All right. Now, I'm going to jump over here. No, well, okay. I'm trying to, this is going to probably get confusing, okay? So syntax is how we construct the way that we speak in our discipline. Does that make sense? Discourse is not just having a discussion. So don't say, oh, our discourse will be a class discussion. That's not discourse. Discourse is using the academic language is communicating using the academic language that is specific to your discipline. Does that make sense? Okay. So, a thing about it is like one of the things that we do is we do acceptable talk. This is how we're going to talk in an English class. This is how we're going to talk to each other. Now that's discourse. Just we're going to talk to each other is not discourse. All right. Then to get a 4, or 4 on rubric 4, you need an explicit, well articulated, explained support for all these items. Vocabulary or function. All right. All right. Now, for a 4 on rubric 14, I want to see there. I want to see explicit evidence from the work samples of how students use language. Okay. Again, specific. Okay. And I'm going to do this. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but let's go direct. Quotes. Ah. All right. I'm going to say the same thing in 11. Direct quotes. Directly quote the samples. Directly quote the work samples. Okay. And then your patterns of learning should be clear for both individuals and groups. It helps to show how the work of a particular to show how the work of a particular focus student is representative of a section of the whole class. Okay. And that's how we do that. Okay, and so let's talk about, I was in rubric 3 again. When you get to knowledge, when that prior learning, remember to tell us what the students know. Number 1, what they can do and what they are still learning to do. All right. And I do a separate paragraph. The students can do this. The students know this. The students can do this. The students are still learning to do this. Then you're going to move into why, because they can do this and because they're still learning to do this, then that's going to drive the supports that you choose to teach them. Does that make sense? Okay. And I really think that for my part, that is all that I have.
Well, let's see if the students have any questions.
I'm going to stop the share now, and then just answer questions. So if you guys want to jot down whatever, so I can see everybody's face. Okay.
And yes, I will share the document. He's got it on, he's already sent me the Google link. So we'll share the document with you, but please go ahead. If you've got a question, you can just go ahead and unmute and we'll take it from there.
I have a question.
Okay.
So I am a little bit concerned about my linking to prior learning. And I was wondering if we were able to only reference our questioning and our dialogue, or can we also like use some of the instruction that we're doing to add to that? And the second question that relates to that is, can referencing like the text from prior lessons count, or does that not?
Yeah, you can reference the prior lesson. Yes.
It
They
wouldn't.
learned how to do this when they know how. We just read to Kill a Mockingbird, and we learned how to do this. You know, previously we read To Kill a Mockingbird, we learned how to do this, and I taught them how to do that, and they know how to do that because of that. Yes. And you can reference that from like wherever you find it. So that's fine. I mean, because prior knowledge is going to be something that happened before. Okay. Next.
I have a question. Like,
Okay.
I know you
I
said
got
like
one.
in rubric 6, because of the COVID stuff, it's hard to get that 4 because of small groups. Is saying that in our commentary going to help us at all?
No,
Okay, that's what I figured, but I thought
Nah.
I'd ask.
we know what's going on. Everybody's like, all of their high school English teachers and college professors and curriculum coaches and stuff like that. We know what's going on. So we understand it. We've talked about it. So
So you're all in it too. Like, it's not just
yeah.
somebody who's sitting.
Everybody that's working on this has either lived it before or is living it right now. So
Okay. Also, one question I had, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but my prior academic learning, they were supposed to build upon, were supposed to already have done Venn diagrams and known how to do that. Well, in my video, I asked them if they remember how to do it, and like the whole class says no. And that was my prior learning.
then you're going to have to, I'd address that in the commentary.
Okay.
Okay.
I kind of use that as challenging them.
Get used to that. That's going to be like your life.
Yeah.
Like, remember when we did that? No.
Yeah, exactly. And like,
Remember last year when Ms. Diamond taught you that? No.
yeah.
So, I mean, and I got AP kids. So
So you think it would be okay to use that, just address it in my commentary that
yeah,
they
just
have
address it.
done
Yeah,
it.
just address it in the commentary.
Okay.
Nobody, every one of us is going to go, yeah, I know what that's like.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
See that in the video, and I'm like,
That's
no.
that's not the first time. If it's the first time it happened to you, it's not going to be the last time it happens.
Okay.
Okay. So I think
I
Austin,
think
did you have a question?
Austin did.
I did. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just couldn't
Yeah,
hear
you're
you. I'm
fine.
so sorry about that. When you were mentioning discourse, you gave an example, and I missed it because I was typing the.
Well, okay. With discourse, like what discourse is not having a class discussion, it's having a class discussion within the parameters of the academic language for your discipline.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. We're going to, like if we're talking about figurative language, we're going to talk about similes and the function of similes and stuff like that. It's just, it's more than a discussion. It's gotta be, I'm going to do something real quick here because I'm not sharing the screen anymore. And I'm going to look at something that you guys don't have and I can't show you. So, all right, but I'm going to talk to you about discourse and syntax. All right, discourse is how members of the discipline talk, write, and participate in knowledge construction. Using this in English, it's using the structures of written or oral language. Okay. So if we're talking about plot, we're going to talk about plot elements. If we're talking about persuasion, then we're going to talk about claims, supporting evidence, counter arguments. Okay. That's discourse, how we talk. Discipline-specific discourse has distinctive features or ways of structuring oral or written language or representing knowledge visually that provide useful ways for the content to be communicated. Okay. So if we're talking about a poem, we're going to talk about Holy Trinity. We're going to talk about diction, imagery, figurative language. And that's how we're going to talk about it. If syntax is the rules for organizing words or symbols together into phrases, clauses, sentences, or visual representation. One of the main functions of syntax is to organize language in order to convey meaning. Okay. So syntax is going to be, I'm writing an essay. I have a format for my AP kids that I adamantly demand that they follow. And that's the syntax because I know how they can pass the exam if they'll listen to me. Stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Building off of Austin's question, how would you, I don't know if you're allowed to give us like specific examples, but how would you support the discourse? Like whenever you said you had to provide an example for vocabulary, the function, and discourse for syntax, how would you show the support for discourse?
Well, like if we're going to acceptable talk, like this is how we're going to talk to each other. If I'm going to speak about, like I said there, if we're trying to persuade, we're going to talk from the standpoint of claim, evidence, and commentary. And I might give them do a presentation, do like a Google Slides or do a PowerPoint or give them a sheet or give them examples, a model for them, those kind of things. Yeah, it depends. A lot depends on what your discourse is.
Okay. And I also had another question. It might be dumb, but I don't know. Is there a task between 1, 2, and 3 that is scored like more? I don't know how to say. Is it which task is scored the hardest? Like, is there a specific one?
None. There's not.
Okay.
The the requirements of the rubric for each task is going to dictate what it is that we're looking for. So they're really apples. 2 and 3 are real closely connected, but they're really, and 4 and 14 are kind of connected, and 12 and 13 are connected. And I would probably say that 7, 8, and 9 are kind of connected, but it's really like it's apples and oranges. It's like 15 different pieces of fruit.
To jump off Ben's question, as an example of supporting vocabulary, so my lessons on character development, I don't think the kids are verbally going to say character development takes place, ABC, but could I say student A shows evidence of interpreting character development by saying blah, blah, blah.
But you want them to use academic language.
Right.
Okay. So, like there's that, I don't know, there's some new thing that I see in a lot of and I can't think of it off the top of my head, so I'm not going to try, but like I will go through those, you go through like whatever my 5 ways that a writer develops a character. And I would like for them to preface what they say with that particular element of characterization. Okay. Like if they're writing the essay,
So like with vocabulary, they could, can they discuss supports that they have worked toward, like in previous lessons?
Yeah. Like you're keeping, like we've got, like we've been doing Henry IV Part 1, right? And we're keeping a running, like we've got a glossary we've got a glossary of Shakespeare words that's on a Google Doc. So, and they're using that Folger, which has great footnotes and all kinds of stuff in it. But anything that we see that's not in the Folger, we're putting that in the glossary. Yeah. So we can talk about that reference there. Yes. Okay. So, so-and-so went to the glossary and found this word and that helped them or so-and-so added this word to the glossary and that helped them create meaning from what they were doing. Yes. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Like with vocabulary, a simple support for vocabulary is a vocabulary sheet. I mean, or a presentation of the vocabulary, but a vocabulary sheet, that's a simple support. Okay. And if you add to it and augment it in any way, you want to mention that. So, okay.
I have a question again about the support for discourse.
Okay.
So I went over acceptable talk in my classroom with my students prior to discussion and filming. But it just covered things like sentence stems of like, I agree, or I respectfully disagree, or I would like to add on to that, things like that. Would that still count as a support for discourse? Okay.
Yeah.
Even if it's not specific
necessarily. Before we talked, yes. Before we talked. Yeah, okay. That's fine.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were doing, their discourse could also be like writing, correct?
Yes.
So if they had an outline, I'm assuming that would be a support.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Samples of other essays.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Graphic organizers.
Right. Sentence starters, but that kind of some of that'll spill over into syntax, but yeah.
These are all good questions.
They are. Yeah. These are good questions.
Anybody else?
Don't drop out. It's really, the thing about it is, guys, I know you got like lots of crazy stuff piled on you right now. I know that. And I know that you're working harder right now than you will ever work in your career. Because your content knowledge is limited. So you're having to go home every night and do your homework. You're having to go home and read stuff that you've never read before. You've got to come up with your own stuff. And I did national board And this is kind of like a mini national board. And I did national board a long time ago, and I was coaching wrestling and I was coaching baseball. And I remember that I was thinking, you know, when I was doing it, I'm like, if I had time, if I really wasn't covered up and completely overwhelmed, that this would probably be a very meaningful exercise for me. And when I did my renewal, it was, because I wasn't coaching baseball. So I was able to spend the spring, you know, I was able to spend the spring focusing on that renewal. And you got, I mean, y'all are covered up more than you're ever, I mean, but you're going to be covered up for a while, but you got to take the time here. It's just answer the questions. Just you know, when you get into instruction, use the evidence from your clips and answer your questions. When you're doing when you do an assessment, use your work samples and answer your questions. When you're doing your planning, use your lesson plans and answer your questions. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. But you're just at that point right now. You're just at that point right now where you're going to be, I know you feel like you're covered up, and I know you feel like you're overwhelmed. One thing I'll tell you is get used to it. Okay. But it's like, you know, I look back like in my first year teaching, and I probably thought I was just like so hot. And I realized like I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I'm trying to even remember when I did have a clue, when I finally realized I had a clue. But I was, you know, I faked it till I made it.
Yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like when you really figure out, especially like with coaching, when I really figured out like what it really meant to be a coach, I'm like in year 27, you know, and I'm going, oh, well, I'm almost ready to quit now. And, you know, which I probably, you know, like I probably never will, but it's, you know, anything that you're feeling right now, that's like, if you're feeling like everything's piling up on top of you, you're not alone. And, you know, and you'll get to a point now. I mean, you'll get to a point one day where you can, you know, like I can walk into my classroom and teach anything that I do off the top of my head, but I don't. I change what I do, but I can walk in there and do, but it's going to be for, you know, right now, it's going to be the heart. Right now, you're working harder. I mean, I worked harder when I was student taught than I ever did, because everything my teacher was giving me to teach was brand new. I mean, I never read it before. It's okay, man. It's okay.
And on top of everything else that's going on, pandemic,
Right.
national crises, one
Right.
after
I mean,
another,
you know,
economic difficulties.
it's a crazy time, you know,
Yeah.
we've really, and at TPA, we understand all that, and we're scrambling, you know, we're scrambling to make sure. We had a meeting yesterday, talk about another change. And when the virtual learning environments came out, we were just making, like, changing stuff on the fly, just crazy stuff. So, you know,
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
You
No.
could-
Not from Xander, huh?
well, I mean, I could just ask him tomorrow because.
Go ahead, Xander.
Since we're hybrid, is it okay if one of my videos is from like A Day and the other one's from B Day? Like, is that
Yeah.
something that they?
Yeah, you just got to have, the only thing on the video clips is you got to have, we're so loosey goosey on that right now. You got to have 3 faces or 3 voices, any
Okay.
combination of 3. Okay. And you're going to be okay. So if you've got 3 kids in your, you know, like I think one day Matthew had, you had one and it had 3 kids. There's just 3 kids in there, but we didn't keep that clip anyway. But at that point there were 3 kids in the room, and then you're hearing voices on the Zoom. Yeah, you're fine. That, you know, just mention that in your commentary, that, you know, one clip's from the A Day and one clip's from the B Day, because it'll ask, you know, there at the beginning of the instruction commentary, it asks you to kind of give a context of what you're doing.
Is it okay also if we use a period from like one from third period and one from fourth period if it's the same class, or does it need to be like the exact same group?
It doesn't matter. I'd keep it the same, but you're doing A days and B days, and you're doing A days and B days like what we're doing at Science Hill. You can't do that and keep your learning segment contiguous. So I would just, that's fine. Nobody's going to get wrapped around it. Everything that had like anything that's questionable gets sent to the supervisors, and the supervisors read them, and then we make our decision, but we're scoring. There are very few things that we aren't scoring right now. So you guys will be fine.
Well, I don't want to keep you any longer, but I do want to see if anybody else has got a question before you go, just because we don't want to miss this opportunity.
And let me find that doc again, and I'll put my email address on there. So if you get wrapped, I'm going to put it right at the bottom. Well, I misspelled language. That's funny. Okay. So that my email address is at the bottom of that shared doc. So if feel free to, I'll help you if I can. If you get, wrapped around the axle about anything, and you've got any questions about anything, just send me an email and I'll get back with you. Okay.
Coach Price, we appreciate your time, and especially since we know you've been at school all day, and we appreciate you so much. And if you all just unmute and say thank you and clap, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Holler if you need anything. Okay. Thank
Thank
y'all.
you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Uh-huh.
So that was very informative, I think, for a lot of you. And I think that it's interesting because a lot of this stuff you've been told. So it's interesting the way he told it in that rubric, just the look fors was interesting. So it is, did you all have any questions about what he said? Maybe that conflicts with something that you thought that you'd like for me to clear up? I will say that the handbook says 4 students, and I would stick to 4 students. That's been stressed at all the virtual learning environment webinars I've gone to. So just to be on the safe side, I'd stick with the 4. Well, if you, they've got several students that are here, especially those of you who aren't Monday night seminar, feel free to go. English folks, unless you've got a question, feel free to go. I was wanting to talk with school librarians. If they need to talk with me, they can stay back. But I appreciate everybody coming tonight and asking so many good questions. Well, I'm just going to go around and I'm going to find out how you're doing. Michelle, we'll start with you.
I'm doing okay. I feel like I'm working on all 3 tasks at the same time. Just
Oh,
trying to-
Cameron, would you turn off record? Okay.
just trying